This is Coda Radio, episode 326 for September 21st, 2018. Hi, everyone, and welcome to Coda Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and the business of software development and its related technologies. My name is Chris. We have no sponsors anymore, so I'll bring in our host, that man established down in the bayou. Well, at least in Florida. It's Mr. Dominic. Hello, Mike.
Well, good afternoon and welcome back from death, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. Although making me laugh actually hurts, so.
Whoops.
It's good to be back. Yeah, this is my first coder since I wound up in the hospital. Quick version, had appendicitis, didn't realize it for 3 weeks, thought I could just push through it like an idiot. Stopped by the ER after things started getting rough. They didn't catch it. They said I was cleared to fly down to Texas. I fly down to Texas to seal the deal on all of the business arrangement stuff. My appendix ruptures. I end up in the hospital for a week. Wes fills in like a gentleman, and now I'm back for an excellent edition of the Coda Radio program. Perhaps the most excellent edition of the Coda Radio program. Right. You had some issues going on earlier this week too, so we couldn't do our Monday recording. I apologize to everybody, but it's good to be back, Mr. Dominic. I've been looking forward to it all week. I ordered 3 HomePods while we were gone. No, I'm kidding. I did not order.
Did you color coordinate, or is it like 2 black, 1 white? We have to know.
I think I would go all one color if I was going to be a multi-HomePod home, but I'm just kidding. No HomePods were ordered. Did get the new phone. I did because I'm on the upgrade program, so it's So I could pay $55 a month, which includes the higher storage tier, AppleCare Plus, and the phone. And I could do that for the X, or I could just do that for the XS too. So a little underwhelmed, but I decided to pull the trigger and do the upgrade. So it should have been here yesterday, but there was a UPS snafu. So instead, I figured we'd just have a nice traditional show and just avoid talking about the whole topic altogether. What do you say?
Yeah, because there's really nothing to say.
It really isn't. Well, let's start with L feedback, which I like this one. Comes in from Wyatt of Vulcan, and he says, hey, Chris and Mike. I thought about passing this article along to you guys to talk about on the show. It's an interesting read, especially if one is a 3D or graphics programmer. Even though I'm not either of those two, I believe Vulkan is the future of 3D and graphics programming. I think having a memory model, which is the link that he just introduced to us, is a big deal. So the group behind Vulkan is called the Kronos Group. And they've recently announced, I think it was September 13th, a memory model, or a memory consistency model, which for a programming language describes how threads in a parallel processing system could access shared data and synchronize with each other while allowing compilers and the hardware the freedom to reorder and optimize memory access. They do this by precisely specifying where and how instructions and memory operations can be reordered, and what the order effect of those memory operations can become, and if they can be visible or not to other threads as well. So, memory models, I think probably the audience is familiar with that. They're, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, semi-new, but not really. But there really hasn't been anything like this for GPUs and a graphics API. So that's the big story here, is on the 13th, Vulkan has become the world's first graphics API to include a formal memory model for its associated programming languages. They label it as a significant announcement, and I've been hearing from people in the audience throughout the week that they think it's kind of a big deal. And so Wyatt passes this along to us, and he asks us the question, with Vulkan having universal support on Windows, Linux, and Android, and now with this introduction of a memory model, is this the future? And where does that leave the Apple platforms? What do you think? It's very odd now. I guess we could see and maybe there already is, I'll have to look, a Vulkan to Metal translation layer or something. I'll look that up. But what do you think about Vulkan in the future for a 3D graphics API? Is it going to be all Vulkan?
Well, I don't think it's going to be all anything, right? Vulkan is definitely looking more and more impressive. The problem is, when we're thinking about graphics programming, we're probably in most cases going to be thinking about game development. And most people don't directly program to the graphics API, right? They use something like Unity or Cocos 2D, or I'm dating myself here, Torque 2D, Torque 3D, or if you have money, Unreal Engine. That under the hood translates into Vulkan Metal or, the OpenGL, right, or DirectX on Windows.
Mm-hmm.
I would prefer that you be correct, that Vulkan be, because Vulkan is more like Metal is not an open standard. Metal is a completely proprietary Apple thing.
Same with DirectX.
Yeah, but I mean, who cares about DirectX anymore? Whoops.
Oh.
They're both impressive. I tend to think that the trend of history is towards more open source and open platforms winning. I would wager that Vulkan will definitely be substantial. My only hesitation on that is Apple is weirdly stubborn when it comes to adopting other people's standards. So they could literally just like not allow it on iOS.
They're super stubborn until they just do it, like with the Qi charging or using NFC for Apple Pay. Like it's every now and then they just go like, yeah, all right, we'll just do the industry standard thing.
It's when their alternative,
right,
when their proprietary standard fails, they go to the open standard. So I think Vulkan's awesome.
It does look like there's, and we've actually mentioned it on the show before, but we don't talk about it enough. Molten VK, which is a runtime that maps Vulkan to Apple's Metal graphics framework for iOS and macOS. And it is available as a free open source project on GitHub. So you have Molten VK, and there's also Molten GL, which is an implementation of OpenGL ES 2.0 API for the Metal graphics framework, which would probably be more predominant on iOS. But that is actually kind of encouraging, because then that means you can still essentially use Vulkan on the Apple platforms, and that might seal the deal for the Macs and the iOS devices.
Yeah, I mean, but isn't it just a translation layer? It's not. Yeah,
they use the term runtime that maps the calls. Is the term that they're using.
Right. So so it's almost like a wind sort of situation, right? Mm-hmm. You're at the end of the day, you're actually calling the Metal APIs.
Right. The translation proxy or agent, whatever you want to call it, is. Jonathan writes in. He thinks he's found something rotten. He says, I'm a new developer, and they're trying me out as a contractor. I think these are kind of common. You start a job, they'll 9-month, 6-month contract, maybe even a year. Everything was good until I got access to work on their Linux boxes. I got an Excel sheet of all the usernames and password, and I felt sick when I got that. But I got really sick. Yeah, I got really sick when I saw the boxes that I'll be working on still had Linux kernel 2.6.
It's a classic.
I went to my team lead and was told that if the client does not want to pay for upgrades, then they do not get the upgrades. What is the best way for me to tell my team, my lead, my boss, or my department why and how bad of an idea this is? Oh boy, Jonathan. I feel like he's asking the wrong question, to tell you the truth. I think the question he should be asking is, should I care? I know we all care. Yeah. We care when things are not secure, when people are mismanaging technology, when infrastructure is weak. We care. Like, it goes against the hacker ethos. Like, you're supposed to take care of this stuff. It is, you're a steward of this stuff. These machines are Jonathan's flock, and his flock is sick and unprotected, and it bothers him quite a bit. The thing is, Jonathan, this is how it is in every single company you will ever work at for your entire life.
It really, I mean, although this is pretty extreme. I mean, there is I definitely agree, except there's one thing that's kind of stuck in my craw about it. He said he's a contractor.
Yes.
If he was an employee, he wouldn't be liable. So there is such a thing as malpractice for what we all do here, right? That's why people spend money on errors and omissions insurance. And in fact, some companies actually just call it malpractice insurance. I would argue, and I'm not an attorney, so I don't know where because we're not regulated like regular engineers, but I definitely do think you have a duty to raise an objection. And if you get shut down, you get shut down, right? If they just say, well, no, we don't care, then so be it. But yeah, I don't know, this feels really bad. I mean,
it's a bad situation.
it depends on what the system is. Like if there's any kind of like mission critical data or confidential customer
Right.
data or employee
Right.
data, now there is real
Yeah.
there's real concern there.
Here's what I would advise Jonathan does is I would try to look at this in two ways. First of all, like Mike said, it might be worth covering your own ass. And you can do that with notes. Start taking notes. I don't care if you handwrite them. I don't care if you type them. Start keeping notes of what you discover and who you've talked to about it and your thoughts at the time about the risk. Date it. Make sure that's clear, that it's time-stamped. That is one great way to cover your own ass. Now, here's the next thing I would do, though. I would come to them with a solution and not a problem. Because if we're talking a large-ish infrastructure at this point, the task of bringing all of those systems up to date, fixing the incompatibilities that arise from the changes, working with the vendors perhaps for whatever reason that might be slowing down the progress of updates, educating the clients on why it's a good idea, selling it to them because they're going to have to be sold on the idea of spending money. And I've done that a lot. You know, nobody likes to be told about maintenance costs. So you have to sell it in a way that talks about keeping things secure, more stable, long-term, sustainable. You have to use phrases like that. Not, hey, we got to go fix this thing on this box because it's what needs to be done. It doesn't work as well. So come to the management and your team or your department heads, whatever, with a solution, maybe a suggested plan of action, even if it's not complete. Come to them with something that solves the problem. Don't bring a big problem to them. You'll probably get more traction with that. You combine that with keeping good notes to cover your arse, recommending best practices in those notes, and also try to create a dialogue where perhaps you can triage this thing or something. Think about what is going to be most comfortable for your organization and then come to them with that solution. That's probably the best you can do, Jonathan.
Yeah. I mean, one line of argument that has helped me in similar situations is an analogy to physical health, right? Like, try to get them to understand that
it's a hygiene
issue. It's hygiene, right? What you're suggesting is that they brush their teeth, floss, and don't eat like candy all day. And if that is annoying, whatever. But the cost of losing your teeth, it could be anything, right? It could be being a fat guy like me and taking a heart attack, right? Just whatever. Tell them that there's these little costs that have to happen all the time, are just like dental or physical maintenance, or even maintenance on a car if you prefer not to mention health.
It's a big problem because it's going to be software patches, it's going to be vendor software that has to get updated, and it's going to be really solving the username and password management solution. Probably passwords haven't been rotated in a long time for some accounts.
And they're in a spreadsheet, which I'm sure is in like Google Drive or SharePoint somewhere.
Or just getting emailed around the office so a copy sits in each person's inbox. Oh, it's terrifying.
It's in Slack with a bunch of emoji replies.
Right. A bunch of thumbs up and flames. All right. So this isn't really an email from the audience, but this is follow-up from a discussion we had in the episode after it was announced that Microsoft had acquired GitHub. And I think it was either myself, probably Mike, somebody said, hey, you know what's going to happen here? One of us said, this is going to get turned into a massive hiring apparatus with all of the data of contributions and the projects people work on and their social connections. Microsoft's going to use this to do basically a jobs board. Well, turns out we nailed that prediction. I mean, we called that day up. You get a couple of bills for that one. So GitHub's VP of Worldwide Sales, Paul St. John, was at an event. He was talking about what he's going to be talking about at the next event he's going to be at. And he was coy about the details, but his comments came after discussion about the role GitHub, having been acquired by Microsoft, plays in connecting open source developers with prospective employers. In that context, he says, businesses use open source libraries, and then they make applications from them, and then they need someone to work on them. He goes on to say, they will email people at GitHub, and they will come to GitHub itself and say, quote, we need somebody to come and work on this application built off this open source library. Can you find anybody in the community that will come work on it? It happens all the time, he says. That was his response to, will GitHub be a hiring platform?
Recruiters are coming.
Yeah. Well, Microsoft is going to be the new recruiter. They'll be looking at what expertise you have and what other projects you have, and then when employers come, they'll sell that data to employers.
So I'm going to make a recommendation right now. Go into your GitHub profile and don't show your email address. Make sure your email is hidden.
Is this necessarily bad? Maybe this is the way to do it.
It's totally bad. It's going to be terrible.
Because it means people will start gaming GitHub, or like, what's your concern? Because to me, it seems like maybe it would be matching the right candidates with the right business.
My concern is ideally, if it was like, Acme company needs to hire a Django developer.
Yeah, I mean, here's an example. Yeah, his example, let's say they build some big application that's dependent on that framework.
That's like not what's going to happen.
No?
Right. So, no.
He says it happens all the time.
No, he's a VP.
Hey, now.
And no offense to present company, but I'm just thinking of a few other VPs in the world. Wasn't Nixon a VP at one point?
Oh man,
Tricky Dick.
Is this a Pence joke? Is this a long Pence joke? Is that where we're going here?
You know what? Sometimes I think Mike Pence is waiting for me to get fired and take my job. I'm just always around.
He's a jackass.
Oh, Barack, I miss you. Although I really don't.
Oh, he'll be back.
Okay. Oh, God. Just like Dracula. So when Stack Overflow first added their developer profile thing that they've now called careers at Stack Overflow, they did this. We're going back. We're going back in time.
Okay.
They allowed you to put contact information on there.
Mm.
And what immediately happened was one brave Borg-like recruiter found it. And the spam did not stop. It's not going to be Linux Academy is looking to hire somebody on GitHub. Of course, that may sometimes be a thing, or that Acme company is looking to hire somebody. It's going to be predominantly recruiters, and it's going to be just a nightmare. Like I
could actually see what you're saying. It definitely, the companies will outsource it to recruiters.
Well, that's what they already do.
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly.
Right?
Of course.
Like some recruiters are great. Don't get me wrong. I'm not like. I don't hate recruiters, but there's also those weird ones who call you from across the world that are super unethical, and they'll just keep calling and calling and calling and calling. Yeah, it's not something. And also, I kind of don't like it as someone who employs developers, because so now GitHub, I'm using GitLab now, but we have some open source on GitHub, is going to advertise what talents my people have to people who want to poach them. One of my issues is hiring people and having them not get poached.
Yes.
Since I've been down here, poaching has been an actual real problem.
I didn't realize until recently, having a few conversations with a couple of different folks, how bad it's gotten. Like, the person is supposed to show up for their first day of work. Oh, nope, they got a better offer, because they can leverage the offers against each other.
That's exactly what happens.
It's good for the employee, right? They're getting the best situation possible. It's just we're looking at it from an owner standpoint, right? So that's our bias.
Yeah. Well, and it's really bad for small businesses, because you just don't have the perks, right? You don't have that. For instance, Amazon is down here and they poach people all the time. Amazon offers people more money than actually exists in the state of Florida.
I've heard a couple of stories of Microsoft doing the same thing recently.
Yeah, and they're down here too. So it's kind of okay, so basically take out all the top tier developers that graduate college every year. Can't hire them. Right? Mm-hmm. And you're left with you really end up getting creative doing things like going to events, boot camps. But I've had recruiters, and this is a tangent, but Chris, I want you to understand, now that you're a big corporate guy, you should understand recruiters are shameless.
Yeah.
I've had them call my office when we were all on site trying to poach someone.
Wow. Yeah, I remember when I first started, when I was in IT still, and I started getting recruiter calls, at first I felt like it was an ego boost. Like, I'm so great, I've shown up on somebody's radar. And then that quickly fades away to frustration, because it really is it's a bombardment. And you're right. Oh man, I was all fired up about this. Like, the right candidates will be connected with the right companies, but you're right. It's just going to be a recruiting fuel.
Well, to be fair to Microsoft and GitHub, they could just say recruiters, right? They could verify, but now we're talking about work and recruit. Yeah, and their money's green too. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Plus, if the companies are legitimately hiring those recruiters to do the work on the behalf of the companies, that's that checks out.
Yeah,
That's the way it works.
Recruiters exist for a reason, right? Like, I can't say I've never used one, so.
Well, you have a little bit of news. Why don't we make our own Hoopla? I think since the last time you and I talked at least, you released a new product that runs on modern versions of Windows and Linux. And it's not a bot. In fact, it's not even probably what people guess. It's something for essentially, unless I'm wrong, what's the industry called? Not the aerospace industry, but it's for people flying.
Military aviation. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Military aviation. It's a radar display platform, including tactical displays, and I don't even know what this word means. RWR. Like, you've gone deep.
Rear warning radar.
Wow,
I've
man.
gone deep.
You've gone deep.
Yeah. Gone real deep.
So it's pronounced how do you Graphon? How do you pronounce it?
Griffin.
Oh, awesome. GriffinRadar.com if people want to learn more about it. Well, that's a huge congratulations. And
thank you. Yeah, it's
this is why you've been doing some of the travel recently, yeah?
That's why I've been doing some of the travel. That's why I've been so this links to something else. By the way, if you want to check it out, go to GriffinRadar.com.
Boom.
Of course, all my sites are pretty.
Yeah, you do always have great sites.
This is something else we should cover. This was the project that I wanted to do in Qt.
Right.
That was originally written in Qt and then had to be brought over to .NET.
Right.
Yeah. So, in fact, there's been some developments on that, Chris. I don't know if you saw. Qt actually replied to me on Twitter.
You mentioned it. I didn't see the thread, though. I didn't get a chance to see it. How did that go?
Yeah,
what was their response?
The response was like a response that didn't quite answer the question. So there is some disagreement on what is considered embedded.
Oh.
That's where we are right now.
Oh, really?
And the ironic thing is the response that they tweeted to me contradicts the conversation I had with their rep. So it is possible. In fact, I tried to encourage them to say, because I guess they heard the show, which, sorry. I tried to invited the rep on. I said, this is very confusing. I've talked to 3 different people from your company, and I've gotten 2 very different answers. I said, and now we have this message on Twitter, which I think is correct, but the official proposal I got from you was the exact opposite. And the question being, is a Windows or Linux tablet that's running standards Windows or Linux, right? So let's just say Debian. Is that considered, if it's mounted in a either airplane or anything like that, is that considered embedded? I thought not, but as we went through that process, the rep said, yeah, we consider that embedded.
So the question that really is at the core of this is, what defines an embedded device? Is it an embedded OS, or is it how it's installed?
That was my argument. It would be that it would be running a headless Linux machine. I would say, sure, embedded.
I mean, just for the sake of argument, what if they had an HP tower in the airplane that fed to an LCD monitor that was secured in the cockpit with like a mounting system? That would clearly not be embedded, because it would be a DVI cord running down to, or a DisplayPort cord running down to a HP PC tower running Windows 10 Professional. And that would clearly not be embedded, but because now they've been able to fit all of that same stuff in something like a Surface,
yeah,
that makes it an embedded device. I don't think I agree with that. It's x86 Windows in this case?
It's standard. It's standard Windows 10 or standard Debian, right?
Yeah, I'm calling shenanigans on that.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because the public reply on Twitter was basically in agreement with me, but also somewhat annoyed that I guess they don't.
You don't
like what it.
Well, they don't like it when you talk about it publicly. They don't like that too much.
So it seems like what happened is like a sales rep made a mistake, but because we're so small, didn't want to take a lot of time to escalate the issue. And I got annoyed. So yeah, but it is still, to this day, I have still not gotten a straight answer on if you just have a tablet running a non-embedded operating system, so straight Windows, straight Linux, is that considered embedded or not? And it's still unclear.
Jeez, that is
so
tricky.
Please, Qt people, come on the show. It's really, even if the answer is yes, we consider it embedded, better to have it out there that, this is our policy. But hey,
I would like to know what the audience thinks, I wonder if they could make the case for that to say it's embedded. And
well, the other funny thing is, technically, again, not a lawyer, the LGPL doesn't care, right? If you can dynamically link the libraries, you should be fine as far as the LGPL is concerned. So
yes.
It's interesting that they even have this distinction.
Well, it's because maybe folks like you don't want to link, right?
No, I was willing to link. I was willing just to dynamically link.
Oh, you were? Okay, I misunderstood. Oh, okay.
Yeah. So first I wanted to pay commercial.
Yeah.
And then I briefly thought about using the LGPL, but this is where the conversation got weird. They're like, well, if it's embedded, you can't, which makes no sense. But
so even with that rather major road bump that you've hit, that you're still churning over in your head, you were still able to hit the ship date, and I assume you were able to do the demos. How stressful was that, and how did you actually manage to pull that off?
So the wonderful thing about Visual Studio is it basically writes the code for you. No, I'm kidding. It was pretty stressful. We ended up having to basically double up resources on the project and just go to get it out the door. There's a little secret in there for the Linux version called Avalonia, but
oh yeah,
which the Madbotter is now actually sponsoring. So
I saw that too. All right, so how do I get it for GNU/Linux? Do I just is there any way for me to contact you? Is that how I get it?
Yeah, it's a call-less situation.
Oh, you dirty dog! You dirty dog.
Yeah.
So how? Okay. But I guess the elephant in the room really is, how the hell did you narrow in on this particular market, on, as they would say, on this vertical? How did you go there? Because Madbotter, right, is working on a productivity bot. And then, of course, I've seen that idea take off like crazy. And so you're looking at other places where perhaps you could niche down on that vertical, as they say. And I'm just wondering how the hell military aerospace is where you landed. That's a big leap.
With you being missing for so long, I was seriously thinking we needed some sort of rescue operation. No, so actually a lot of the consulting work is in that vertical already that we've been doing for some time.
Oh.
So there was just an opportunity to work with a partner, and it went ahead and...
I see. So you already had feelers in that area, so it was just sort of a natural slip right in. Nice.
Just slip it right in.
Nice, dude. Well, congratulations on shipping. Like you said, it's Griffin Radar, right? Did I say that right? GriffinRadar.com?
Yep, GriffinRadar.com.
Nice. Well, congratulations. That's a big deal. You. I'm going to, I'll talk, if people are interested, I figured I'd talk a little bit about my business thing that's pretty huge for me, is the transition from being an independent owner of Jupiter Broadcasting and really having to be extremely scrappy and fight it out in the streets with other podcasts that are advertiser supported, and trying to work, try to encourage people to do our Patreon, and just pulling at every string we can to stay alive. And now we've made the transition where we are formally a part of Linux Academy. And a huge part of Linux Academy's core values is the community, because they themselves, as Linux users, recognize that if you're going to build a large, successful company that makes revenue off of Linux, then it's in your best interest when you get to a certain size to be an active participant in that community, reinvesting back in the very community that's made you successful. And so that's always been a big part of what Linux Academy has been about, but it's sort of been everyone's job, which only works at a certain scale when everybody is really busy. It's easy to say community is important. So at some point, they made the determination that we need to have an actual community department, and we need to have a VP of community. And that is the role that I have taken on. And the podcasts are part of that giving back to the community. It's their contribution. That's why they removed the ads from the podcasts, is they want them to be something free that goes back to the community, that gets people excited about Linux and open source, or just technology in general, which maybe once you get, you get to a point you think, I'm ready to learn more, you think Linux Academy. I mean, we've been out here getting people excited about Linux and open source for 13 years, so we're pretty used to doing that mission. So yeah, when we sat down and talked, it's funny is it originally started as, what are some ways we could just work together more? Because we're both kind of doing the same thing. the funny
Right.
thing about most professions is from the outside, you think you have an idea of what it takes to do the work. But then when you go into an industry or you go into a profession, you realize there's so much more to it than what people see publicly, or what people could even, assume publicly. You just don't know until you're doing it. And that is maybe the most true for the content industry. The amount of work, I mean, you hear about...
Oh, yeah.
You hear about, famous people who are strung out on drugs and pushing themselves to the limit, or alcoholics. It takes an unbelievable amount out of you. And, I would say 90% of my job is... No, that's an under... 98% of my job is off microphone. The easiest thing I do is record these shows. That is the easiest aspect of my job. And it's really hard to even understand what could he be spending all his time on? What could he be doing? But once you get into the industry and you're running a business, you realize there's so much more to it. So now I'm making this transition to where I have a marketing department that I can contact now. And there is a development department that I can contact. And there are people on staff who are super knowledgeable about AWS and Azure and Linux security. They some of them have come from Amazon and other areas of the industry. Like, they are really experts on this stuff. So it's like all of a sudden I can't even really wrap my head around it. I've gone from scrappy little, cut every edge, every corner we can to save money, work 60 hours a week, to now I have an actual full-time small team that works for me, and I have a bunch of other resources in a much larger organization that, working with a PMO, I can task and get things out of. Like, we're talking about a kickoff meeting next week to just update our art, because our art is old. The Coda Radio artwork has not changed in 6 years or whatever, 5 years. But how long have we been doing this? It's just been the same.
We started in 2012.
So, and it's just simply because of budget reasons, right? It costs money to hire people to refresh the art, and really it does need it's lower resolution than it should be for high DPI displays and all that stuff. Like, it's just an area that was not even under consideration. And now next week, I'm going to be meeting with an art team to start kicking around ideas and just how to just give things a refresh. It's this massive head change for me. And there's a lot to do as a VP that I didn't really have a full picture of, because how could I until I got into that position? And now I'm involved in a lot of meetings. I'm a stakeholder now.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm a stakeholder. And so it's like every day there's usually a meeting I'm involved in. So there's been a lot of new work, too, that I'm picking up while I'm recovering. But since I'm not doing as many shows while I'm recovering, I've had more time to do the VP stuff. It's a type of transition that I'm still processing, really. I'm still fully adjusting to it.
Right. So you're adjusting to now being the grand viceroy of community.
Right. Yeah.
It seems like the perfect marriage. How did you trick Anthony into doing this?
Well, so I think we should explore the why a little bit, because we've like I was saying, it did start as just like maybe we could do like a collaboration on a show or something, and then the conversation over Texas Linux Fest just sort of expanded from there. And at one point, he's like, well, maybe we should just buy Jupiter Broadcasting. Because if we're going to be doing 2 or so, and they also at the same time want to launch several shows that they've bought studio space for, they've created studio space for, they've recorded test episodes, but they can't really. There's a lot involved to it, to making shows, to making them weekly, to publishing them on the different platforms. Like, we essentially have a ton of industry knowledge in this area, and so we would just be providing a lot of at first it was going to be providing a lot of consulting, but then the conversation expanded from there. But going back to the why. So, I was really at a point where, just very frankly, the last 3 years, I've been living off of fumes. I'm not complaining really, because this is my choice. I enjoy the work, and I would rather be broke and do something I enjoy than make a ton of money and hate the work. Because I've done that before. I did that for a long time, and I know that doesn't work for me. So I preface this with I'm not complaining, and I'm thankful that I could do it at all.
Sure.
But I don't have running water at home because it costs $320 to turn on running water, and I couldn't afford that. And so I've been living for over a year or two now without running water, and I have this big bladder that holds 30 gallons at a time, and I fill that with water, and then I have a pump, and I transfer that into the tank in my RV, and then my RV has a pump, and that runs the toilets and the sinks, but it's not sanitary. We can't drink that water. Yeah. We brush our teeth with it, but probably even that's pushing it. Like, that was my reality. And the only way I could see to improve it was to bring on more sponsors or replace the sponsors with higher paying sponsors. But I wasn't really, I wasn't inclined to do that because it's a sales process, and it can take up to 6 months or more to close a sale. And I would have 4 or 5 of them I would have to do that with. And I also really, I worked hard to hand choose those sponsors and work with them. And I was a customer of each one of those sponsors, and I had a history with them, and I wasn't really keen on replacing them, but I couldn't launch more shows to feature new sponsors because there was no revenue to do that. Plus, switching to higher paying sponsors is just locking in a more rigid production schedule that can't be missed. And it just raises the stakes that I'm there for every episode, that I'm healthy, that, I never take a break. Like, it just raises the stakes on all of those. So that didn't feel sustainable. Plus, higher paying sponsors are now, because the podcast industry has grown so much, are looking for a minimum of 50,000 downloads. And if you want something that's going to actually make a difference in your life, they're looking for 75,000 downloads. Right. Now, our shows will reach that monthly. Like, I think this month, as an example, Linux Action News will be downloaded by 130,000 unique people in 1 month. That's a fantastic number that I'm very proud of. They want 50 to 70,000 per episode per week.
Right, not just the average overall, right.
And I don't believe, when you look at the Linux and open source and free software market, and then the audience in that would listen to podcasts, and then the audience in which that would choose to listen to our podcasts, I don't believe, once you niche down into that vertical that much, that you can have 75,000 downloads per week per episode. You can have a couple of lucky episodes, but unless you're going hard on the clickbait, emotion, basically YouTube crap, you're not going to get there in a podcast. Podcasts don't get shared the way blogs and YouTube videos do. It's much more organic, slow discovery. People don't link other people to a point in a podcast. They'll link people to a YouTube video or a text article. And so discovery and growth has been a slow process for the last 13 years. And I'm very proud of where we've gotten, because it's, these are magazine numbers. These are larger than magazine distribution numbers. Like, they're larger than local, small to medium market radio station numbers. Like, I'm proud of these numbers, but they're not 75,000 per week. In fact, most of them that are that large are associated with larger organizations or celebrities. And so it was going to be an uphill battle. Plus, there are a lot of Linux podcasts now that I would be, essentially, we're all competing for the same sponsor dollar. And then there'd just be that we would just be making a slight improvement on our revenue and our quality of life while being even more stuck to a rigid production schedule. And that just didn't
sounds
seem...
like this gives you
Go ahead.
Gives you a lot of freedom. No, this sounds like our new Linux Academy overlords all bow to the penguin. It's giving you just a tremendous amount of freedom and runway.
Yeah, and it's a matter of being able to work with a larger group of people who understand how much work content creation is, because they're content creators too. And that, I don't think I would have found anywhere else. Like, if you look at, say, like, you look at our other sponsors, like DigitalOcean, or their area is servers, right? But Linux Academy's area is content creation, and they have a house full of staff whose entire purpose is content creation. Anthony himself was one of the original content creators for Linux Academy back in 2014. So he himself is intimately familiar with the content creation process and how much damn work it is. So that insight is it's almost invaluable because it's the difference between them understanding why sometimes it takes a while to produce a show and then packing on tons of expectations and all of this. So that was when I started considering that aspect of the relationship, that sort of seemed like this is the shot I have. Like, I could probably keep going, doing it the way we were, but I'm exhausted by being so poor. You know, I couldn't get my truck fixed. I couldn't replace my tires. I couldn't fix up the RV. Like, it's exhausting being so broke all the time. And I know people have been worse off for me, but you know, there was literally weeks where I'm like, well, I can no longer afford to get gas anymore. Like, I don't know how I'm going to my truck I've replaced it now. You know, was getting 16 miles to the gallon. And I'm like, I think I'm sleeping at the studio tonight. So that way I can be there to do shows the next day. And it just is exhausting. And so to be able to go into an organization who is just growing like crazy and has the runway to do things like finance trips to events or put gas in the RV, which can be thousands of dollars when I take it to an event, or fly and pay for my hotel stay. Like, it opens up my possibilities of what I can do to create future content tenfold. Because now I'm working with a company that has an expense process, that has hired me with the intention of being able to travel and go to community events and, meet up with people, and is encouraging me to do so. It no longer becomes how are we going to even be able to afford to do this? Are we going to make 6 months of payments on a credit card after I return from a trip? This is part of my process now. And the other thing that's meant is being able to bring Joe and Wes on full time. Like, the timing of that was sort of miraculous, because the week that Wes Wes started full time like on a Wednesday, and he and I flew down to Texas because new employees, they go down to Linux Academy HQ and they go through an onboarding process. And so I was down there to button up the final details on the merger announcement, and Wes was down there to do onboarding. So I'm in Texas when my appendix ruptures, and he flies home because at that point I'm like, I'm just not feeling well. I'm going to go sleep. And so I just started sleeping a lot. And so I booked Wes a flight home, and he flew home, and he started full time that Monday that I went in, and I went to the hospital Sunday. And so Joe and Wes were able to keep the shows going. Angela was able to provide historical context and direction in areas where they needed help. And we had a full team that was able to just step up and keep the shows. So we didn't miss any shows while I was gone, while I was in the hospital for a week, and then recovering now for several weeks. Right. We haven't missed a single show, unless some other circumstances have come up. And that, we nailed that by one day. Like, that's how, that kind of, if we had missed that by a week, then it would have all been on me. There would have been nobody here bringing sponsor revenue in. There would have been no shows going out. The network just would have gone silent for a couple of weeks, possibly. And so it's just, it's totally changing my game. It's totally changing my game. And now the other thing it means is that Wes and Joe can commit themselves full time to this. So that means Wes has been available on a Sunday. He's been available on a Thursday midday. We don't have to worry about his day job anymore. And so it's made it way more possible to do all of this stuff. And not to mention, I got healthcare 2 weeks before I ended up in the ER.
Oh, you lucky duck. No, I mean, you're unlucky that you went to the ER, but the healthcare is, whew.
And I was, we'd talked about it on the show, you and I had both had to go this year healthcare free because of the cost, and I just couldn't afford it. And I thought, well, I'm healthy. I haven't gone to the doctor in 7-8 years. I got nothing wrong with me. I'll be fine for one more year, is what I thought. And I didn't even make it through the year.
Yeah, you didn't make it.
I didn't. And I'm still going to be paying out the nose for the stuff that's just the cost of stuff out of network is freaking me out. It's going to be possibly tens of thousands of dollars. And
at least you have something. I mean,
I would have been completely destroyed financially. So I've had a few weeks to reflect on this, and it just seems like what I was doing before was pure insanity. I mean, the reason why I walked around 3 weeks...
And what I'm currently doing.
Yeah. So. I mean, the reason I walked around for 3 weeks with appendicitis and then ruptured my appendix, I mean, I pushed through one of the most miserable... I was so sick. I was feverish. I was exhausted, and I pushed through it for 3 weeks because that's how the old business was designed. Is I had to be there to keep doing the shows, to keep the sponsor revenue coming in, to keep stuff going out the door, and plus I was trying to finish this business deal. It was just totally unsustainable, and I pushed it too far to the point where I got way more sick than I should have. If I would have gone into the hospital the first week, they probably would have just been able to do an appendectomy and just put a couple little holes in me and got my appendix out. But instead, I pushed through it for 3 weeks, and I traveled to Texas, and I ruptured my appendix. And in doing so, and apparently I likely spent several days, if not maybe a week, with a ruptured appendix, and the bacteria of that appendix went throughout my body and wrecked my right hip and those muscles, and the muscles that hold my stomach in place on the bottom were poisoned and nearly destroyed. And then the areas around where my appendix has been severely damaged. The doctor described it as just this most horrible looking thing. And all of that damage would have been prevented if I had gone to the hospital sooner. But I was so focused on work and pushing through this because I've had when things get really stressful and things really get going, sometimes my health begins to fail me. And that's been something that's happened quite a bit over the last 3 years. And generally I managed to push through it after a few days. But this time that wasn't what was happening. And just to make it clear, I did go to the ER at one point and they missed it. So I did try to go in, and they happened to miss it. They didn't do any imagery. And cleared me to travel to Texas. So I did try it, but that still was like 2 weeks into it. It took me 2.5 weeks to get to that point. And it's just because I didn't have health insurance at the time, or actually I did just at that point, but I wasn't used to thinking like I have health insurance. I had the mindset of I have to avoid going to the doctor, and I was just locked into that.
So much of what you're saying, and from our prior conversations, is completely like one-to-one with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's but brighter future, right? So all Linux all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it is. There was a bit of sadness of losing, like the being a business owner and being, a quote unquote entrepreneur or whatever. I didn't really ever consider myself that, but being like a self-sufficient, I own my own business, I've created this thing, right, and now it sustains me. But the reality is I was sustaining it, and it was not sustaining me.
Right.
And so that's where this transition, I think, has been really good for me. I think it will be good for me personally once I'm through all this medical stuff and all of that. But it does mean playing a new game now. Like, I think one of the reasons why I'm going to be okay at this is because I spent 7 years working at a bank that was extremely bureaucratic. I've shared some of the stories on this show before, and very, very political. And so by comparison, Linux Academy, with its like 115 employees and its remote work culture, is a cakewalk. Like, it's kept me busy every day. And I had to spend multiple days like doing expense reports and stuff like that. Like, I feel like I've had to do a few TPS reports, but at the same time, compared to the 7 years I spent in that bank, this is easy. And I was surprised at how quickly I could recall those skills. I figured I was, and I think I've said before, I am unemployable now because I am so used to having unilateral decisions. Like, if I need to subscribe to a service to do my job, I subscribe to that service. It takes me 10 minutes and I move on with my day. But now I got to hem and haw, and I got to seek approval for a certain amount. Like, there's different things that have changed. I don't think it's for the worst, but I didn't think I was cut out for it. I didn't think I could deal with that crap anymore. But the reality is, it's been, to my surprise, like riding a bike. I'm kind of a natural at it, I guess. It's sort of horrible to say it. I kind of feel bad saying it, but like, I'm pretty good at playing the politics game and making sure that the right people are staying informed, and that I'm making sure I'm checking with the right people and showing a certain amount of presence in the group discussion. And there's other roles I have as a VP in management areas where I have to be actively participating. But it's been significantly easier in a way because I haven't been doing as many shows, and I've been recovering and taking it slow. So I've been able to just sort of focus on that stuff. But it has been way easier than I expected to integrate back into a corporate structure. The Linux Academy one is pretty easy going. It's as far as it's pretty modern in its structure and in its remote work culture, so it sort of works well for me since I'm up here in Seattle. Well, most of the team is all around the world, so I'm not like some weirdo who's outside the office and I'm the only outsider. It's pretty common for most people to be out. And they have a policy where if you ever want to visit the office, you fly in, they'll put you up at a hotel, they'll pay for the flight, and you can stay and work at the office as long as you want. And to that end, even, we're building a studio there, essentially a JB2, which will have a lot of the same gear. So what I can jump on a plane, 3-hour flight down to Texas, and I've left myself a go bag there, so I can literally just jump in the car, go to the airport. I don't have to pack a thing. I hop on the plane, I fly down there, and I've got a go bag stashed down there waiting for me, packed, clean clothes, ready to go with all my toiletries and everything I like, even a razor, and I can get right to work at a studio that's down there. And then when I'm ready to go, I jump on a plane, fly back, 4 hours, I'm back in Washington.
That's really cool.
So it's working so far, but long term we'll see. I think long term there's going to be a matter of balancing the VP role with balancing the content creation role. But I'm really looking forward to getting to travel to more events. Really, once that's the number one thing. When they told me it's going to be a multi-month recovery, I'm like, no, I've got 2 events scheduled I want to go to. In the next 2 months, I got 2 different events I want to go to. Like, you're not going anywhere.
You're not. No, you're grounded.
Yeah. And it's, for me, it's a relief not to do sponsorships. I think we had great sponsors, and I really appreciate them keeping us going for as long as they did. But I've told everybody about DigitalOcean and Ting a few times now. So, and it means with this show, we can just sit here and chat. We can just have an uninterrupted conversation. And right. I think that's pretty great. And I think I'm going to try to find ways to still make it valuable for Linux Academy. So I'll probably mention, actually, in fact, here's an example of something I'm going to try to do. They have a Ruby developer position that is open right now. And so I'm going to try and get that information out from time to time. I'll put a link in the show notes at coder.show/326. They are looking for a full stack Node developer, which is a remote position, a Ruby developer, which is a remote position, and a Ruby on Rails developer, which is a remote position. It looks like they are looking for Go ahead.
Are all their positions remote?
No, I was just going to say, it looks like they're looking for a senior iOS developer that that's out of the office. They're looking for a PMO, Scrum Master, which is out of the office, and a technical writer, which would be remote, and an R&D web developer, which they're looking for someone in New York for that, interestingly enough. But I'll put a link to this in the show notes if anybody is like a Node developer or a Ruby developer and looking for remote work. They have a position open. So I'm going to try and probably integrate that kind of stuff. So it's still bringing some value to Linux Academy, but it's also bringing value to the audience is sort of my plan. And we'll see how that works, because I am hoping that's a good balance that everybody's happy with. And you know what else it's meant, which is I'm actually really, really excited about, because people have basically asked me on a daily basis since we took it off the air. But it means that we now have the resources and staff to bring back User Air. So we've relaunched the User Air program, which is really kind of one of the audience favorites, I guess, because you get to hear some of the same hosts that you listen to on the other shows, but they let their hair down and take their pants off and sit around and talk about life, the universe, and Linux.
And Linux.
Yeah. So User Air 48, Living the Dream, is out. It's error.show.
Very good.
You got a chance to listen to it, error.show. Yep, I like those guys, Popey and Dan, and Joe's on there. And I'll probably be on the next one, and I'll tell the full story, because there's some aspects to it that are just, they're not worth going into on this show, but oh man, are they mind benders. Oh man, there's so many mind benders in this whole process. So I think I'll come on the next User Air and on 49 and share my story.
So something I've noticed is a lot, like you mentioned, Dan, a lot of elementary love going on.
Yeah. I think they are larger than Fedora in user base by about 100,000 users now. And I think people are noticing that a trend line of improvement. Like, you can look at each elementary OS and you can see that they've held a singular vision, and it's been getting more and more refined each time. And they're also very active, like Cassidy and Daniel are very active in the community. Like, they just were both at the Libre Application Summit. They are usually at some other major event every few months. So they're really participating in the overall discussion a lot. And so I think it's sort of like this multifaceted approach that they've taken by continuing to put out good stuff, by being active in the community, and by trying to change the status quo a little bit, and being now pretty clear and communicating fairly well after some hard lessons learned on communicating that status quo change. I think it's paying dividends. And also, not to toot my own horn, but they have been much more active in and talking about some of the things behind the scenes on Linux Unplugged. And I think that does something for these projects. I think when they come on the show and they don't go for the sale, they go for, this is the challenge that I'm working on. This is the thing we're trying to solve. Like Dan came on one time and talked about how they're building this centralized location service for the desktop for any application that needs location awareness that is controllable by the user. That's, it's by default very secure, and you can manage the privacy. And much like on iOS, you can go to one central spot and deny location for certain applications. They're building something like that in there. And he talked about why they're doing it and the challenges they've had and the reason why they've decided to go this approach and what they think the good sides of location and bad sides of location services are. And then, he's not on there just pitching it as a new feature. He's just on there talking about the code that he's been struggling with recently. And I think that resonates with the audience. People appreciate the hard work that they're putting into this, and then you see the results. And they just had an AMA on r/Linux, and there's lots of love in there, lots of complimentary discussion in there.
No, I saw that. Very interesting.
What do you think? Have you thought about giving it a go, or are you sticking with Pop OS?
So I actually did take a dive into Elementary.
Oh, really?
I was intrigued by the Elementary App Store and, frankly, Vala, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Also, it's damn pretty, right? Like, it's
clean, right? And it's fast.
It's clean. It looks good. I'm not going to say that it's a snow leopard, but it's definitely like a slush leopard so far. Like, we could get there.
All right. Okay.
That was a little
slush
Elementary
leopard.
OS slush leopard. First of all, I was surprised how small the team is over there. And it's obviously, I say over there, it's an open source project. So far, so good. I mean, I am running it in a VM, so there's some weirdness. I don't know if I'm going to drop pop for it.
It's so smooth on physical hardware. Like
I imagine it is.
It is. Yeah. Like just the way that even the windows open and move around is really smooth. I think it's much nicer than GNOME Shell.
Yeah, it definitely looks better.
Yeah. Slush leopard. That's so funny.
Slush leopard.
I will also just give a little plug. They've just released the new beta, I think last night, of, I'm checking, see if I have a link, of Juno, which is their 1804 base, with a bunch of other, here it is. Yeah, I'll put a link to this in the show notes too. So the new Juno release is the one that Dan's been talking to us on Unplugged for quite a bit about, and it's looking really solid. And the other thing that I like that they do is they don't do a time-based, they do a open issues-based release schedule. So they sit there and they burn down the open bugs and issues, and then once they get them all cleaned up, that's when they do a release. And so they get to that point, then they release a beta. And then they get to that point again, they release beta 2, and then they're going to do an RC, close all down the bugs, and then they'll do a final release. It's not like we're going to ship it on October 1st. Right. We ship it when we've cleared up as many of the bugs as we possibly can.
Wait, ship software when it's actually done instead of for an arbitrary date? Chris, this is revolutionary.
It kind of works because my son has been using a two or even maybe almost, I don't know, 3. It's 1 or 2 releases old of Elementary. He's like on a 2 or 3 year old install on his laptop of Elementary OS. And, he's not trashing it, but, kids and computers, like they'll turn them off randomly. He's not super hard on it, but he's not easy on it either. And that flawless. In fact, it's been better than the used iMac that one of the other kids has used. It's just been totally flawless, and he runs Minecraft on it all the time. He hooks up secondary displays. It's just been, he runs the monthly updates. And they just built a really good product. I'm sure there's other distros that would be like just as good as that, but it really, that to me has been one of the big tests, and it's really held up. I think it's a good workstation development environment. It's clean. It's out of your way. They've got a good notification system. It gets even better in Juno. I like their terminal a lot. And if you're mostly just working in a text editor and a shell, I really would strongly consider people take a look at it. And I don't like it when people say it's a Mac OS ripoff. I think that's really unfair. I think they're just going for a good design aesthetic. And I think they now have a more consistent look than Mac OS does. So I think they've surpassed what, people originally accused them of. And it's worth a go. And it's based on Ubuntu. So pretty much you can get any software installed on it that you could install on Ubuntu.
Right. You can apt yourself to glory.
Right. So that's nice. I did a review in Linux Unplugged 267, but just as a quick addendum, I now am the proud owner of a ThinkPad T480.
Very nice. How is it?
Exceeds my expectations by a fair margin. It is really nice. So it's a 14-inch screen. I went for 1080p instead of 4K because it's just a little bit easier still with Linux. I put KDE Neon 1804 on there. And it's got gigabit Ethernet. It's got USB-C Thunderbolt 3. It has audio in and out. It has an SD card reader. It has USB-A. It's 3.6 or 3.9 pounds. And then one of the things that I freaking love about it is it's about a 10-hour battery life under Linux with this thing. It is an all-night battery life is how I use it. I leave it plugged in all day at work, and then I go home. I don't even bring a power adapter with me, because I have 10 hours. And if I need my laptop for 10 hours at work in the evening, I'm doing something wrong. So I just have been thrilled. I've also used like my old MacBook a USB-C power adapter with it. Works great. And I'm able to run our VoIP software that we use to connect between hosts. I'm able to run that, and it doesn't kick up my fans, which was really the thing I was going for. I got an i7 in this thing that runs at 1.9 gigahertz, but can turbo up to 4.2 gigahertz, 4-core. 32 gigs of RAM. So I was hoping it could run a Chrome app without kicking the fans up, and it has indeed successfully done that. Plasma is just so great. I've really gotten down to customizing it super quick. I am now at peak Plasma efficiency. I'm using window rules to make sure that like Slack and Telegram and my calendar and my email applications always open up on the right desktops and with the right size and proportions every single time. I'm not having to, in my Chrome browser, which I've switched back to from Firefox, is now, it always opens up on desk one in the proportions so that I can still see my CPU usage and all of that kind of stuff perfectly. And it's just, you combine that with the built-in K-runner, which is like a launcher that you might get for macOS, like Alfred or Quicksilver or use Spotlight. They've got something even better built into Plasma. It's even faster, and it's even like you can run commands for. It's just the greatest environment for me. I'm really happy with it. The fans don't kick up unless I'm really pushing the machine. 10-hour battery life is just more than I could have hoped for under Linux. And it's got a terabyte NVMe drive in it, so the disk is super fast too. I think it's one of the best computers I've ever used. I don't know if I'm very, very happy that I got it. It was my Linux Academy work machine, so Linux Academy actually bought it. If I was buying a machine for home that like I want to use on the couch and just kind of fart around, I may have gone with a Galago Pro or an XPS 13 after your positive review of the Galago, because I could then still get Ethernet in that really rare circumstance I might need it, or the XPS 13, so I could just go the USB-C lifestyle and that gorgeous infinity display. But for work, I need legacy ports because all of my current audio gear uses, quote, legacy ports. So I have to have USB-A. Otherwise, I'm in dongle town up the wazoo, and I have to have Ethernet because it makes VoIP connections and video connections more stable, and it also makes it simpler to transfer large files. These are must-have items, and I wanted excellent Linux compatibility with a great keyboard because I was really just done with the MacBook keyboard. And I got it all. And I think the ThinkPad T480, not the S, but the T480 is just, it's a blow away. It's a blow away machine. Customer sat is high, very high. And
Customer sat, Tim? Okay.
Yeah. And I recommend if people are considering it, one of the things it does that I love, it's got 2 batteries. It's got a built-in 3-cell inside the laptop. And then I've got a 6-cell external. And because you've got 2 batteries, you can hot swap that external battery, and you can run like for an hour or 2 off of the internal 3-cell.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, it's just, I think the internal 3-cell might have more wattage than your old Galago battery did. I don't know about your current Galago. So it's, 3 or so hour battery, and you click on an external one and you get, If you got a couple of those batteries, you could just go forever, basically, because I get 10 hours out of one of them. So anyways, I would say that I have, I think, solved my long hardware conundrum that I have struggled with, as documented in this show, for a long time. I feel like I've reached a conclusion. There's still some software stuff I have to pull off to do all fancy on the road recording, but I got time to figure that out because I'm not going anywhere for a while. And it feels great. It's just wonderful. It's wonderful to be super happy with the setup and to feel like I didn't have to compromise on the hardware. You know, I could have lived with 16 gigs of RAM, but 32 gigs of RAM gives me a lot more headroom. And I didn't get it with dedicated graphics, but I planned down the road to get an eGPU, and I'll just invest in that. So I think Thunderbolt 3 and going 1080p will be the biggest long-term game changers for me, because I can go with higher res monitors externally if I want. I can hook up Thunderbolt docks if I want. I can hook up eGPUs. So it seems like you match that with 32 gigs of RAM and an i7 that has 4 cores that can turbo up to 4.2 gigahertz. I think it's got a lot of runway. So I can really invest in getting this thing set up right. Pumped about it.
Sounds awesome. Yeah, if you pop an eGPU, like it's not in there next to it.
How's your Mac?
I can see it being a pretty...
Your MacBook holding up? What? No? Problems?
Yeah. So this is a replacement MacBook, and the keyboard does not function.
This is a newer replacement machine, and you're already
it was from I think a month ago. I took the other one in because it was having issues, and they kindly just gave me basically the same computer. Right? They just swapped it out. Although I did not know that when they do that, I guess I should have known, it's always a refurb usually.
Yes.
And I can tell you why this computer was given back to the Genius Bar.
Keyboard.
The irony is I'm traveling again next week, and I have an Apple thing I need to do. It's an iOS thing. So I literally have to stand at the Genius Bar probably most of the day tomorrow.
That is so frustrating.
Yeah. Well, and this is something I learned the hard way. So I have the 15-inch 2017, but the high-end one. Not all Apple stores keep many of them in stock.
Right.
And they will not replace it with a different computer, nor, and this is the best, nor will they replace it with a 2018.
Yes. Yeah. And it gets even more complicated if you do like a bunch of fancy build-to-order options online, you know, like if you upgrade a bunch of stuff.
That's what I just did the high everything. Well, not everything, but
you just the standard default high, but even that they don't stock.
Yeah. They don't stock. And because it's the year-old model, they don't stock it at all. So I'm going to be in this weird situation of I have to get this crap done. And when I say done, like deployed onto the App Store. This is the only Mac I have, and it doesn't work.
The VNC, baby. No, I joke, but because that's
honestly, if I was hoping they were going to release new Mac Minis, and I was just going to do a headless one and absolutely just, you know what, SSH in, write some build scripts, and do it. Just keep my Galago would be my road machine.
Yeah. Really, you should be able to do all this on an iPad Pro by now, and it's kind of ridiculous at this point.
Well, the iPad Pros are faster than most of the Macs.
I know.
So
exactly.
I know what the answer to this problem is because they have that very liberal 30-day return policy. It's I buy another one, or like a 13-inch one.
Take it on the trip.
Use it for the week I'm on the trip, and just return it.
Would you though, or do you like? I could see myself like being like, I like this machine. I'm taking it back. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I would take it back.
No, I have to say I've had like people email the show and you see it. They tweet me just like laughing about how much of it, just a hard time I've had with these laptops.
Yeah.
I think they're just like badly made.
Yeah, that keyboard was just a bad idea from the beginning, really.
This is the second replacement I will have to do.
The Hulk says that maybe you should look into Hackintoshing the Galago.
The Galago's not beefy enough, I think.
Well, maybe. I've Hackintoshed some. Actually, laptops are the hardest thing to Hackintosh. But
yeah, and there's some weird stuff there.
Well, man, that really does stink. That really is no good. It's one of those situations too where you have this dependency on a particular type of work tool, and it's of course one of the most expensive tools that you have. So that's what makes it extra frustrating. And you're right.
Actually, so I did the math. It literally is.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
It's There is a temptation to just like buy a 2018 because supposedly
That new keyboard with that new film on there.
the film fixes all these problems. But
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, I could see that. That does seem to be what their patent implies too.
yeah, but that would be throwing away $3,000,
Yes.
which is basically the original. Yeah.
Yeah, they almost need to have like an upgrade program like they have for the cell phones, you know?
Or they could build better keyboards, but let's move on.
Yeah, that's true. That could happen.
So,
Yeah.
One last thing before we call
Sure,
it.
sure.
Real quick. What are your thoughts on Linus's announcement regarding...
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Oh,
5 minutes or less, though. So, between us.
Wow. This story has dominated the bulk of my brain space all week. It has been, when the news dropped, I was floored. I've never seen Linus do anything like this before. Plus, he always seemed very, very convinced in his particular style of management. It seemed like it was sort of his personal mantra, and that he was never going to change. But having now followed this story very, very closely, probably to an obsessive degree, I would say, and you can piece together various parts of the story, and we actually have a timeline that's very fascinating. So it would appear that Linus was contacted by the New Yorker and asked some questions last week about abusive behavior and behavior that prevents women from participating in Linux kernel development. At this point, last week, Linus knew that they were going to publish this article. And I'm sure he was genuinely embarrassed by that and probably has a sincere desire to change now that this has become very public and that he's been in the wrong. He has been, verbally aggressive to an extreme degree. Greg KH has called him childish for it. He says that, Linus has the language of some children, but they've generally been fairly good-natured about it. So it would appear that then after being contacted by the New Yorker, Linus talked to various top-level kernel developers, got Greg KH to agree to take over and finish up the 4.19 development cycle. So Linus could take some time off and maybe return some point, maybe 420, maybe after. Then a code of conduct was quickly chosen, and it was committed. It was agreed to by a very small handful of developers. I think it was signed off by 6 or 4 developers. If you don't include Linus and Greg, I think 3 other developers, where their previous code of conflict was signed off by like 30 or 40 developers, a much larger group. Linus then makes his public announcement, and then everybody starts reacting. And it seems that this has really been something that's been building and been going to catch up with Linus for a very, very long time. Some of the people involved have thrown down with Linus before, Sage Sharp and others, years ago on the Linux kernel mailing list. Sage Sharp was then known as Sarah Sharp, and she was a contributor to the USB 3.0 stack. So she was an active participant in the development process and got into a heated argument with Linus about his behavior. And it's really been on everyone's radar pretty much since that Sarah Sage moment. And this has all been building. Several, it appears, individuals went to the New Yorker to sort of expose Linus for his abusive behavior. And the New Yorker has a very strict policy of contacting any subject that is part of an article they're writing. In fact, if I remember correctly, the New Yorker has a policy that they will, at a minimum, try to contact you 3 times to the best of their ability to get statements from you. So that is what tipped off Linus that this was coming. And the New Yorker article has been published, but it was slightly modified to also reflect his standing down. So sort of a hodgepodge article. When you read it, it starts with this is what's happened, and then it takes this massive turn to calling Linus a sexist abuser, and which was going to be the original article. And I think the question has become, will Linus even return? And will there be a fork of the kernel that doesn't have this code of conduct? The code of conduct is a separate issue, and I don't really feel like getting into it. I feel like, it's up to the project individuals. If the individuals involved with the project that work on it day to day felt like they needed a code of conduct, then they're probably in the best position to make that determination, not some yokel that's just watching from the outside. I think maybe my only criticism might be the specific code of conduct they chose, because it's very politically charged, especially the individuals around it are sort of lightning rods for social justice issues, and it is inherently a very politically charged document that is sort of infamous for these political issues. So they picked a very well-known code of conduct, but they also picked one that comes with quite a bit of controversy around it. So
it has a lot of baggage.
yeah. And the bigger picture here is Linus's apology. I read his apology on Linux Unplugged 267, and he seemed legitimately, genuinely sorry. And that he'd really realized he had been, like, he writes in there that he thought in the effort for the best patch that this was excusable. And now he says he realizes that wasn't true, and he sincerely apologizes. That could have ripple effects throughout open source. I think a lot of projects have taken the meritocracy inspiration from all great Linus and have sort of used that as their justification to maybe be a little abusive, which is a charged word. But my thinking about this with Linus's behavior was, imagine if I treated Wes, Joe, or Angela, or you that way when there was a mistake made in a show. Because these are live productions. These go out to thousands of people.
Right.
It's how we make our living. If you make a mistake, it's a big deal. And how the F could you do something like this? You're effing destroying us. It would create a toxic work environment here. It would be, everybody would hate me. It would be, I would be feared, not liked. It would be an awful work environment if every time you made a mistake, I flew off the handle and started cussing you out. And I know that does happen in private industry. I mean, we all know some famous CEOs that are well known for doing it. But it doesn't make it okay. It makes it awful for everybody else that has to get that shit rained on them. And so when I put myself in Linus's position and imagine myself behaving that way, it felt wrong. It felt like that was
too much.
Abusive.
Right?
Abusive. It is abusive, I guess. It's verbally abusive.
Yeah, it's just not a good way to run a business either.
So I respect and appreciate that he seems to have had a self-reflective moment and is owning it, saying it's his fault, and then apologizing for it, and taking time away to really reflect on it and not be focused on work, but be focused on himself. He even implies in that he may be getting professional help. I think that's respectable, and I think that is an applaudable move. And he is an important contributor to technology, and I think if somebody in his position can do this, I think it sets a good example for people in other open source projects and maybe even in corporations. So I think him acknowledging this and stepping aside, as long as he comes back, is a good thing. If he doesn't come back, I think it would be a loss.
See, that's the part that wasn't clear to me. I actually kind of agree with the criticism on Linus. I always felt that, especially as I've gotten more and more involved in going to Linux events and stuff, there's just people just aren't nice. I don't even know what to say, right? There's a few personalities that, kind of how Apple guys act like Steve Jobs, kind of guys used to act like Linus and yell at everybody, right? Oh, you're a moron if you don't know how to do this or whatever. But for him to be permanently out seems, I don't know. I guess it just seems like too much. The other thing, and this is what I would be more concerned with, I hope there's not serious talk about a fork.
I think people are waiting to see what happens. Yeah, that would be awful. Yeah. And how could you? And if there's one fork, there'd probably be many forks if that happens.
Right.
Maybe each major distro forks.
Well, and we have a lot of these big commercial players in the community now. I'm thinking of you, Microsoft. It seems like the community shooting itself in the foot. I've seen some of the, I'm sure you have too, the forums and the fun going on.
Woo!
Yeah,
it's worse than the systemd stuff.
Not as bad as the Unity stuff, though. Yeah,
I think it's not likely because the way these code of conducts are applied is literally a patch is applied to the kernel source tree, and you could apply future patches that could be a revision 2 that maybe use more clarifying language and outline perhaps more roles of the enforcers. So the enforcers is the technical advisory board, which I think is 10 people at the Linux Foundation. And there's really nothing outlined there in what their clear responsibilities are. It's just if you have an issue, email them. It's very vague, and it's very vague on what their reach and extent is. So I think they could do a patch that is a Rev 2 that maybe changes some of this or reclarifies some of the language. It's based on the Covenant Code of Conduct. It doesn't have to be the exact copy of it. So yeah, I would hope that is the route this goes, is that they just refine the document to be better reflective and better, more specific, and then avoid a fork. It's just a patch. I don't know.
I hope so.
I hope so.
I mean, just some of the rhetoric around it's getting a little already just a little heated, but we'll see. Yeah. I think it was time. I think we're seeing this in a lot of open source communities too. Right?
That's it. I've worked in environments where inside a company where there's been somebody who is just, they're a cursor, they're a yeller, and it's their way of managing a lot of stuff coming in. It's, you cut down the people that don't do right. And I think there's people, I think we all know this is a common thing that does happen, but it feels like Linux, being 27 years old, is at a point where it can sustain another transition. We can afford to be a little more inclusive because it's not a make or break, diehard, scrappy little project that's going up against NetWare and Unix and Microsoft Windows NT. It has won. It's taken over the industry. And so,
right.
And Linus himself says this in his post. There are other, what he calls pain points, where they've had to make transitions and, switch to like Git and from Bitbucket or move around the way the patches work and who's in charge of it. And, there's been other pain points that were massive transitions they've had to make. They just weren't as political as this one. So that's why I do hope he makes it back, because he's been there for all those other transitions and he has weathered those storms and I think properly stewarded the kernel to the next phase. And so he has proven that he has a track record of being able to do that. He's proven he has a track record of building one of the world's best kernels ever, and the market has rewarded him and Linux for it. There's also people now that are attacking the foundation, trying to call for people to harass the sponsors to get someone thrown off the technical advisory board. And there is also people that are posting the salaries of Linus and Greg and everybody else and making a big stink about it. Everybody's freaked out and blown away that Linus in 2016 or something like that made $1.6 million or $1.3 million as a salary. But to me, relatively, yes, that's a lot of money. But to the industry, for anybody high up in the industry, it's not. As an example, in 2016, Johnny Ive just got a $30 million bonus. Or it might have even been $60 million. Just a bonus.
It was just ridiculous.
Yeah.
Right?
And he's got hundreds of millions in stock options. And my point is Tim Cook's doing all right too. Like the Linux Foundation and this entire industry that runs Linux would not exist without Linus. So the fact that the foundation, all those fat cats at the foundation that are sitting around doing management stuff wouldn't have a payroll. They would have to go out and do other jobs if it wasn't for Linus. So the fact that the top guy who created this thing is making 1.6 mil is not a great deal. That's not relatively as much money as it could be.
No.
In 2000, Steve Jobs offered him a job to come work for Apple. He'd probably be way, way richer if he had taken Steve Jobs' job offer in 2000. So yeah, 1.6 is a lot, but I don't think it's worth the witch hunt that's brewing over it on Twitter right now.
I agree.
Well, Mr. Dominic, anything else you feel like getting off your chest before we get out of here? Or are you ready to go stand in line at that Apple store?
I'm ready to go stand in line at the Genius Bar.
Well, in the meantime, people should go check out the new project, griffinradar.com. Is that what it was?
That's right.
And anything else you want to plug?
At Dumanuko on Twitter and
Brilliant.
Linux Academy.
There you go. Yeah, Linux Academy has a $2.99 sale going on. And I mention this because they extended it. That's less than $30 a month, and it locks that price in forever, as long as you remember, for all their new content and everything. And it's going on right now. I think it ends on the 24th. It's a pretty good deal. So it's worth checking out. I'm at Chris LAS. The network is at Jupiter Signal. Go follow him at Dumanuko. And a big thank you to Mr. Payne, Mr. Wes Payne, for filling in while I was out. Much appreciated. Everybody loves Wes. In fact, maybe we'll read some of
Thank
those
you.
love letters next week. Thanks for joining us, everybody.